We are very given to believing that a lot of what we become, a lot of who we are, is determined by our upbringing and our environment. That's critical to our success in life and to shaping the people we become. But of course, a lot of recent research has also pointed to the fact that our genetic inheritance, an awful lot of our genetic makeup, is going to determine rather long-term traits and characteristics of who we are, what we can be, what we can do. So is our DNA and is our genetic inheritance more responsible and more influential for who we become than, say, our parental upbringing or our circumstances? We're all obviously a mixture of biology and culture, and one of the most difficult things is to find out which bit is responsible for which. And to help me disentangle that this evening, we have on my right, your left, Robert Plomin, who is an eminent geneticist and psychologist, and he's also the author of the recent book, Blueprint, How Our DNA Makes Us Who We Are. Next to him, we have Angela Saini, and Angela is an award-winning science journalist and the author of Superior, The Return of Race Science. On my other side, I've got Simon Baron Cohen, who is the director of Cambridge University's Centre for Autism Research, and he's also the author of The Essential Difference. And then finally, but by no means least, we have Güneş Taylor, who's a geneticist at the Francis Crick Institute in London, and who focuses on the genetic determination of sex characteristics. So would you please welcome our panel for this evening? So as I mentioned in my brief introduction, we know that there's a mixture of nature and nurture, and we know that we have genetic inheritance, and we also have influences on us from the environment. So I'm going to ask each of our speakers to take 3 minutes to set out their stall on whether there's a greater influence, perhaps, from what our genes provide us with as our starting kit, or whether it's really to do with our environmental shaping of what we're given in that initial inheritance. So, Robert, would you start us off, please?
Thank you. Thank you for doing this. Why do you think you are the person you are? Say your personality, are you shy? Mental health and illness, are you depressed often? Or cognitive abilities, how well did you do at school? When we think about what made us who we are, it's easy to think about those things you can see and feel, like your parents and upbringing, the school you went to, your friends. What I'm going to talk about is inherited DNA differences, which you can't feel in the same way. And so for 45 years, I've been studying the extent to which genetic and environmental differences are responsible for making us who we are. This research, a huge area of research that's been going on for a century, it describes what is in a particular population with a particular mix of genetic and environmental influences. It's not talking about what could be in another population or another time. It describes what is. This book, Blueprint, is the culmination of my 45 years of research, and I conclude that inherited DNA differences are the major systematic force making us who we are as individuals. That research points to the importance of the environment, but it also shows the environment works very differently from the way we thought it worked. It's not due to the systematic influences that we call nurture, parenting. So there's a chapter that's called Parents Matter, but they don't make a difference. And that's what it's about, that parents obviously do matter, but differences in parenting don't make much of a difference in children's outcome. We don't have as much control over the development of our children because genetics accounts for about half of the differences between children on just about any trait that you can imagine. So that's sort of the first part of the book, that DNA matters, the environment, it doesn't work in the systematic way that we assumed it worked. And so what I mean is that if you were cloned, and your clone was reared in a different woman, grew up in a different family, went to different school, your clone, when it grew up, would be very similar to you. You'd notice how similar you are. Physically, you'd be very similar, because that clone is like an identical twin. They'd be as similar as identical twins reared together, because rearing together doesn't make you similar. What runs in families is DNA. So if you've seen this film, three identical strangers about three identical twins. They're triplets. They're clones of one another, reared in very different environments. Their similarities are amazing. It's a dramatic illustration of what we have a mountain of evidence for, showing the importance of nature and not nurture. The environment's important, but it doesn't work the way we thought it worked. It's unsystematic. It's called non-shared. It makes kids in a family different from one another. So that was the first 30 years of my career, and then along came the DNA revolution, and we probably won't talk about that much today, but it's going to change everything because we can now read our DNA blueprint and predict problems and promise from birth.
Thank you, Robert. Are we just our genes? Let's have the view from Angela on this.
Well, I'm a science journalist, so I'm not there doing research and coming up with theories of my own. And my job, as well as to kind of understand the science and then convey it to the public, it's also to unpick why scientists do what they do, why they say what they say, the agendas, motivations, the funding behind the research that gets done, and try to put research in context and in some ways give the long view. Yeah. And we have to understand that this debate that we're having now is a debate that has rumbled on for more than 100 years. And it started, when we talk about nature versus nurture, that phrase originated with Sir Francis Galton, the man who invented eugenics. He was a cousin of Charles Darwin. And for him, this really went to the heart of the problem. How can we distill what portion of who we are is down to genetics and nature, and what portion of who we are is down to external circumstances like environment and culture and society. And that pitting these two things against each other and trying to weigh up which one has more weight than the other is an exercise that scientists have been doing for, like I said, decades, many, many decades. Have they got any further along? Yes, in some ways, because we do have more understanding of how genes work now, and the kind of work that Robert does, looking at genome-wide association studies and looking at links when we see twins, how much of that is down to nature and how much is down to nurture. But I think what is becoming clear from having spoken to lots of scientists who work in this field is that these things are not two separate things. They work in tandem with each other. So when you have an environmental kind of exposure, that affects your body in quite a visceral way. It even affects the development of your brain. So we know, for instance, neuroscientists know that taxi drivers in London, and we've had this research for a long time, the areas of their brain associated with memory, I think, are larger because they're exercising that area of their brain, and that when they stop being taxi drivers, that change starts to be reversed. And so this idea that, there is some innate portion of you that is fixed and never changes on the day that you're born, and then there's also another part of you that is just what culture and society and environment and nutrition have given you, and these two things are somehow separate, I think is not really the way to think about these things. It's not nature versus nurture. It's nature and nurture together. And we don't have the full answers yet, I would say.
Thank you. I have to say that whenever taxi drivers boast to me about their hippocampus getting so big because they did London Knowledge, I have to tell them, that means some other bit of your brain was reduced. Probably the political sensitivity part. So, Simon, nature, nurture, are we making progress? Is it the right question?
Well, I'm glad to hear Angela saying that it's not about nature versus nurture, because that was a kind of old debate, and I think this festival is all about how the light gets in, and if we're still debating nature versus nurture, it means the light hasn't really got in. We now all recognize that these interact. I was pleased to hear Robert making the case for genetics, because we do now have lots of ways of measuring what's called heritability, whether it's through twin studies like the ones that Robert does, or comparing children with their parents, or looking at the DNA itself. There's a lot of ways of measuring heritability, and there isn't really any question that human traits are heritable. We can look at physical ones like height and weight, and they are strongly heritable, at least 50%. But that means that there's a genetic predisposition interacting with environmental factors. When it comes to behaviour, Robert said parents matter. Well, I would make the case a bit more strongly that I really do think early influences from parents, from the environment on how children are nurtured are hugely important, particularly for emotional well-being, but we shouldn't be losing sight of the genetic predisposition that is also a driver for behaviour. I work in the field of autism. So autistic kids, as you all know, struggle to socialise, struggle to communicate, and have rather narrow, sometimes called obsessive interests. Autism seems to be strongly genetic. You can look at the heritability of that, and some estimates are as high as 60 or 80%. So genetics is playing a big role. And when the molecular biologists look for the genes for autism, we've now found about 100 genes which contain rare mutations that are associated with those sorts of behaviours. They don't account for the majority of autistic people because these rare mutations are only found in about 5% of autistic people. But we know autism runs in families. Autism is strongly genetic. So the genetic contribution is probably also coming from common genetic variants. So these are variants that we all carry in different forms. Common variants that you find in any population, and it's probably the combination of those common variants that is contributing to the genetics of something like autism. But to find those common genetic variants, nowadays we've realized you need really big studies. Each of those common genetic variants may only be having a tiny effect. So to detect them, you need population studies of the scale of 10,000, 20,000, even 100,000 people in one group compared to another group. And we are in Cambridge just launching a new study on the genetics of autism, where we're collecting DNA from 10,000 autistic people. So genetics and environment.
Simon, thank you. Güneş, where are you standing on nature and or nurture?
Nurture. Yeah, thanks. As was mentioned in the introduction, I'm a scientist, I'm a molecular biologist, and I study genes. So I can't honestly say that genes don't matter because I'm afraid they do matter. But what I understand of the question, nature versus nurture, I think is more, what do I do as a human being? What do I do as a user with information about this sort of information? I think that's actually what the question is, not to completely derail the debate. But I could now rattle off information about, we know increasingly certain genes that are incredibly important for determining maternal behavior, at least in mice, for example. If you carry a mutation in this particular gene and you're a mouse, you won't look after your pups. Those kinds of studies obviously do exist. They are published. I trust them as a scientist. I look at them with a critical eye. But that's sort of a scientist's endeavor, right? What then happens is these studies get published and everybody else, including myself as a human being who doesn't actually who doesn't specialize in this stuff, reads it and goes, oh, what does that mean for me as a potential mother in the future? What does that mean? What does it mean, right? And I think that's what the debate's about, basically. It's undeniable that genes and your genome is the basis of who you are as a person. It's undeniable because you start off as a single cell that is just instructed with that information. That is the basic starting point of your life. It is what determines how you grow, what shape you are, and all the rest of those things. However, we all do many things in our lives that aren't necessarily written in our genes, right? I don't know about you guys, I don't feel particularly comfortable in this blazer right now, but I'm wearing it because it's socially determined that I should be doing something like that, right? Sometimes you get angry at people and you think, oh, I want to, But we have society that tells us things like, don't hit people that you don't like because it's not okay. So we all learn to do things that we would, arguably be going against our predetermined genetic nature, right? So the real question, actually, I think that we're faced with at the moment is, in this era of increasing knowledge and people like myself and others on this panel spewing out more and more facts, as it were, data about who we are and what our genes say we are, is actually, what do you want to do with that information about yourself? What kind of person do you want to choose to be in light of this information?
To continue watching this video, click the link in the top left or in the description below. Or visit IAI.tv for more debates and talks from the world's leading thinkers on today's biggest ideas.